This episode is brought to you by HP Plus. In a world full of smart devices, isn't it about time your printer got smart too? Now printing is smart with HP Plus, and the HP Smart app is how it all happens. You can print from your phone with just a tap, no matter where you are, even from your garage/home office/yoga studio. Huh, that is smart. HP Plus. Learn more about smart printing at hp.com/smart.
Welcome to the Pick the Brain podcast, the show that curates inspiration. I'm Jeremy Fisher alongside Aaron Falconer. Sit back, relax, and get ready to get your brain picked and your soul fueled. All right, Aaron, today we are back with another show, and we are going to hear from a really good writer, which I know you respect as a writer.
I sure do.
We're going to hear from Aaron Sorkin, who has written a lot of interesting things. Some you might be familiar with, a movie called A Few Good Men, Social Network. He was head writer on a show called The West Wing, generally regarded as a really, really good writer. And he's got some interesting things to say in this commencement speech that he gave at Syracuse University. So we're going to hear a segment from him. Aaron, I know you're excited to get started with today's show.
Giddy up.
All right, let's do it.
I've made some bad decisions. I lost a decade of my life to cocaine addiction. You know how I got addicted to cocaine? I tried it. The problem with drugs is that they work, right up until the moment they decimate your life. Try cocaine and you'll become addicted to it. Become addicted to cocaine and you will either be dead or you will wish you were dead, but it will only be one or the other. My big fear was that I wasn't going to be able to write without it. There was no way I was going to be able to write without it. Last month I celebrated my 11-year anniversary of not using coke. Thank you. In that 11 years, I've written 3 television series, 3 movies, a Broadway play, won the Academy Award, and taught my daughter all the lyrics to Pirates of Penzance. I have good friends. You'll meet a lot of people who, to put it simply, don't know what they're talking about. In 1970, a CBS executive famously said that there were 4 things we would never, ever see on television: a divorced person, a Jewish person, a person living in New York City, and a man with a mustache. By 1980, every show on television was about a divorced Jew who lives in New York City and goes on a blind date with Tom Selleck. Develop your own compass and trust it. Take risks, dare to fail. Remember, the first person through the wall always gets hurt. My junior and senior years at Syracuse, I shared a 5-bedroom apartment at the top of East Adams with 4 roommates, one of whom was a fellow theater major named Chris. Chris was a sweet guy with a sly sense of humor and a sunny stage presence. He was born out of his time and would have felt most at home playing Mickey Rooney's sidekick in Babes on Broadway. I had subscriptions back then to Time and Newsweek, and Chris used to enjoy making fun of what he felt was an odd interest in world events that had nothing to do with the arts. I lost touch with Chris after we graduated, and so I'm not quite certain when he died. But I remember about 1.5 years after the last time I saw him, I read an article in Newsweek about a virus that was burning its way across the country. The Centers for Disease Control was calling it Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome, or AIDS for short. And they were asking the White House for $35 million for research, care, and cure. The White House felt that $35 million was way too much money to spend on a disease that was only affecting homosexuals, and they passed, which I'm sure they wouldn't have done if they'd known that $35 million was a steal compared to the $2 billion it would cost only 10 years later. Am I saying that Chris would be alive today if only he'd read Newsweek? Of course not. But it seems to me that more and more we've come to expect less and less of each other, and that's got to change. your friends, your family, this school expect more of you than vocational success. Today is May 13th, and today you graduate, and the rules are about to change, and one of them is this: decisions are made by those who show up. Don't ever forget that you're a citizen of this world. Don't ever forget that you're a citizen of this world, and there are things you can do to lift the human spirit, things that are easy, things that are free, things that you can do every day. Civility, respect, kindness, character. You're too good for schadenfreude. You're too good for gossip and snark. You're too good for intolerance. And since you're walking into the middle of a presidential election, it's worth mentioning that you're too good to think people who disagree with you are your enemy. Unless they went to Georgetown, in which case they can go to hell. Don't ever forget that a small group of thoughtful people can change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. Rehearsal's over. You're going out there now. You're going to do this thing. How you live matters. You're going to fall down, but the world doesn't care how many times you fall down, as long as it's one fewer than the number of times you get back up. For the class of 2012, I wish you joy. I wish you health and happiness and success. I wish you a roof, four walls, a floor, and someone in your life you care about more than you care about yourself. Someone who makes you start saying we where you used to say I, and us where you used to say me. I wish for you the quality of friends I have and the quality of colleagues I work with. Baseball players say they don't have to look to see if they've hit a home run, they can feel it. So I wish for you a moment soon, when you really put the bat on the ball, when you really get a hold of one and drive it into the upper deck, when you feel it, when you aim high and hit your target, when just for a moment all else disappears and you soar with wings as eagles. The moment will end as quickly as it came, and so you'll have to have it back, and so you'll get it back no matter what the obstacles. A lofty prediction, to be sure, but I flat out guarantee it.
Okay, so Aaron, lots of good things that were covered there. We didn't listen to the entire speech. I think that there were some things that weren't really applicable. So if you are listening and you want to listen to the whole speech, you can find that on YouTube. And we will put the link to the original speech in the show notes of this episode. But I think we got the meat and potatoes of really what he was going for here. I wanted to touch on one of the things he mentioned where he kind of described his addiction to cocaine and how many years of his life that had sort of taken from him. And I like it for multiple reasons. One is I love hearing people who make it out of the other side and have a realistic story about sort of the challenges and what came with that. But the other thing is he mentioned something that I think, I kind of want to park on and talk about for a second. He mentioned that he didn't think he could ever write while not on cocaine, which is so interesting because knowing how well regarded he is as a writer, and you can just tell that there was some level of attachment, even insecurity within someone who's a really great writer, that he wouldn't be able to do it without some kind of really unhealthy habit. So it kind of made me think, like, this is the takeaway for us. Is there a bad habit that we think allows us to do something well? If that's the case, we're probably wrong. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. Number one, I really found this interesting as well because I've never had a cocaine addiction, but I think I might have mentioned this on the show before. You and I have definitely talked about it offline. But before I would write, every time I had this pattern that inevitably ended up with a big growing sense of anxiety, and I'd never be able to do it. I'd never be able to get it done. If I get it done, it'll be shit. And it really kind of every single time there was this big anxiety storm cloud hanging over me, which was very, very uncomfortable. But I didn't really want to part with it for the exact same reason. And I thought, like, if I don't have this, I won't be able to get out of me what needs to get out, right? Like the good stuff. And it became really debilitating to the point where I wanted to, stop writing, because I was just like, if this is what I got to go through, I might not want to do this anymore. And obviously it's not the same as a cocaine addiction, but it ended up almost becoming a bad habit, because it was like this chicken or the egg. I feel like at a certain point I started switching on the anxiety button to get myself to write, to want to write, right? And so when I started kind of having awareness on it, I was like, wait a second, what if I didn't feel this way? Would it be possible? And I started dissecting it and analyzing it. And as a result, I've had a way different experience with the writing and the anxiety. And so I kind of totally feel what he was saying. And the other thing I just wanted to say is, I think with a guy that's this talented, on the one hand, there is certainly this, I don't know if I could write without cocaine. I also think a guy that, numerous people have called him a genius. I think when it comes to that level of creative excitement in your head and all of these big ideas, I think it's also just a way of managing a lot of that. You've got all these big things and you don't know how to process them and get them out of you. So I would hazard a guess that it's part fear of not being able to write, but also part management of all of these big, fantastic ideas that are in it, too big for any one person's head to manage.
I am really glad you brought that up, and I hadn't thought about that, but it's a really good point. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was describing how he gets this sort of manic energy sometimes, and he has since quit drinking alcohol, and he's sort of trying to live a very healthy and clean life. But he's trying to figure out how he can sort of manage the day-to-day living that goes on. And he doesn't understand how some people can just live life and just be normal and not think about this kind of stuff, like the super deep concepts of life, and your mind just always thinking. And I told him, I was like, this is the blessing and the curse of being a smart person, man. I hate to say it that way. It sort of sounds elitist, but in a way, if you have just a basic level intelligence or even higher, like seems like the higher up you go on that rung on the ladder, the more you struggle with like lots of things, just generally being bored with existence. Well, that's one thing. But the other thing is like your brain won't let you stop, and it's always thinking about something new. I thought about that when I heard an Elon Musk interview recently. Like he was sort of describing how his brain works, and he's like, you don't want to be me. He's like, people call me a genius. They call me this world. You don't want to be me. It never stops. It's exhausting. I sleep 4 hours a night and I can't stop working because that's just how my brain works. And so I think that it's a very good point that you tapped into.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I think
I also happen to be a genius. So,
well, I think that you and I don't like discussing problems without providing some kind of solution. I think this is why you and me are such big proponents to meditation, exercise, creative outlets, finding healthy ways, because your brain's going to be looking for something to do, right? Like there's no such thing as just sitting as like a bump on a log, just waiting for life to happen to you if you're reasonably intelligent. And so really, it's about, instead of getting caught in unhealthy habits, try to find a way to get caught into healthy habits, which is why you're such a proponent of staying active, keeping your mind active with things that are positive. And, it really can have a positive impact on your life instead of negative. It's not like a curse to be smart,
No, definitely not. Yeah, I think that's right. I think one of the quote unquote cures for this kind of overactive mind or imagination or whatever you want to call it is to get out of your mind and into your body. So in other words, instead of trying to distract yourself with drugs or go into another world of drinking or with drinking to slow your mind down, whatever, blah, blah, blah. The quickest thing you can do and the most beneficial / least harmful thing you can do is get into your body and out of your mind and allow that mind a break. Really, the only way you can get out of your mind is when you get into your body. And so that's exercise, that's meditation, that's whatever it is. But this is why you hear so many great thinkers saying, about living in the body, because it must be wild for what's going on their mind. You got to take some of that pressure off.
Yeah. One of the things that he mentioned when he was giving this little chat, he said that people should develop their own compass and trust it. So that's a little bit different I wish I could pick his brain on this to get a little bit more information on what he meant by that, because I think you and I have talked about this in different ways. Your approach has been to listen to yourself, like look inward, and the compass will sort of present itself. If you're paying attention to yourself, you'll sort of know where to go. Develop your own compass and trust it. It almost sounds like it's a figure out who you want to be and then follow that. So it's more external in a way. I think maybe it depends on who you are, what works best for you. But I thought that was an interesting perspective to develop your own compass and trust it. I do think it's an important point, no matter what angle you take, that you do need to be figuring out what is right for you as an individual, not what's right for the group, not what's right based on limiting beliefs that you might have gathered when you were younger, but who you actually are as an individual, and trust that. It's easier said than done, but I think it's important.
Yeah, well, what I see happen a lot is this, especially when with new hires and in my old company and, just still being out there in a little bit of a way, is you get these people, they start new jobs and they're bright and they've got energy and enthusiasm and they've got a goal and they've got all of these key components in place, but they have fear or they don't have confidence. And maybe it's just a lack of experience at that point, but they have all of these great traits. And then they respect me or they respect whoever they're working for, but then they start to become dependent on what I'm saying and what I'm tracking and how I'm doing things. And I think that's kind of what he means about have your own compass. It's like that's the missing link. Like you can have all the excitement and smarts and intelligence and all that stuff, enthusiasm, but the real thing you've got to do is take the big leap and say, this is where I want to go, and now I'm taking the step. And it's very easy to get drawn into other people's opinions of what you should do. And look, I'm a big, big proponent of mentors, for sure. We talk about that all the time. But even mentors, well-chosen mentors, what they're saying has to be taken with a grain of salt, right? You still have to carve who you are out of that advice. Because if you just start not blindly, but if you start following the advice given to you to the letter, you're no longer living your full story. And so that kind of falls under that category also of like with 100% responsibility comes 100% freedom. And not only that, a lot of people just have bad advice, even people you respect, right? Because they're advising you on your journey and nobody can do that better than you. So I totally agree with this idea of this compass, and you're the captain of the ship, and don't forget that.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to the generic versus specific advice conflict that you have, where there's a lot of generic advice out there that's technically right, but maybe wrong for you.
Exactly.
And what you need to be following is specific advice that applies to you as an individual.
Right. And you got to take that general advice, and that might be really good general advice. But the onus is on you to take that and then say, now, how do I mold this to me instead of me molding to this general advice? Right. So I think that's the compass part.
No, I think it's a good point. Something else he mentioned is that you're too good to think people who disagree with you are your enemy. Now, I know he was speaking to a class of graduates, and he's got a bit of favoritism because they're coming from a school that he attended. But I think that that's a message that you could probably carry through across any environment.
I think this is such an important message for right now. That was one of my favorite points in this, is that it's so petty. So much of the behavior I'm seeing today, whether it's on the news or in politicians or just what's, even with some friends, it's just so petty, these reactive responses because somebody doesn't agree with you. You're bigger than that. Stop pulling yourself downwards. And I'm seeing this happen over and over and over again. And it's the wrong trend.
We're finding more reasons to separate, and we're finding less and less reasons to find common ground and connect.
We've got to stop making everything so personal. That's my thing. This is not your enemy, because you can disagree with somebody who's not getting vaccinated, okay? And I do disagree with somebody that's not getting vaccinated, but I don't take it personal. It's not a shot to me that you're not doing this. And it's not, I hope it's not a shot to you that not you, whoever I'm talking to, that I am doing this. It's not personal. We've got to stop belittling ourselves and become rational thinking, objective people again. We're too big for it. And he said, I don't know when this speech came out. It was a while ago, I think. But truer words have never been spoken. Honestly, we got to get the hell out of this, and we got to stop taking things so personal. We're better than that.
Well, and you can tell when he wrote this speech, he's really trying to inspire the future leaders of the world. He's coming up with some message to hand them so that there can be some positive impact that comes out of it. And he says that a small group of thoughtful people can change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. He said that because he's trying to inspire people to realize that it doesn't take a lot of people. But I do think it's important, to your point, that you have to be unified. You know, you can't have a small group of thoughtful people that are bickering with each other about the small stuff. Like, that's not how change happens.
No, it's how change for the worse happens. It's how we start getting the ship going in the wrong direction, which it is.
Yeah, I know. It frustrates you. It frustrates me. I think it frustrates a lot of people, but I think it comes down to an individual level. We want to try to share this message with as many people as we can so that hopefully they can hear it, but it ultimately does come back to you and me. And I think it's one of the things that you and I really try to do is practice what we talk about on the show. So, you know, as frustrated as we can be, we can only control what we can control, which in this situation is ourselves. So I think you and me and anyone listening who is also frustrated by the division that's happening can take comfort in the fact that we as individuals maybe can band together and become that small group of thoughtful people that correct this ship and turn it in the right direction. Well, big thanks to Aaron Sorkin and the folks from Syracuse for putting this out there. I think this is a good place for you and me to wrap up. So until next time, I'm Jeremy Fisher.
And I'm Erin Falconer.
Reminding you to keep moving, keep thinking, and keep growing.